Today we're making a clasp, which will be functional and the main character in your jewelry piece.
So I hope this tip will be useful for you because it took me so long to actually understand how I have to make my jewelry. I was just like risking there. I'm just looking now, I'm like, I should have put third arm. The hinge is working perfectly. The closure is tight. We love the tight, good closure.
Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're making a clasp, which will be functional and the main character in your jewelry piece. On this clasp, we have an eye, which I will show you how to make it as well, but you can create your own design. That's the best part of making this clasp. And we have quite tiny hinge here as well, so I will show you how I'm doing that as well. If you know the steps, the hinge is not that hard. Yes, I said it, it's not that hard. Anything in general is not hard if you make it in steps and you understand what you are doing and what you want to achieve from your jewelry piece. Even that soldering makes sense when you actually know what are you doing. So I will tell you everything, how to achieve it, and I'm pretty sure that would guide you to create your own hinge in your jewelry piece. This video will be long because we have a lot of going on here. I was thinking to put in 2 parts, but I don't know, like we have full long video with the clasp itself, all the closure, everything. I will talk through all the video and I will explain you the steps I'm making. We could use it where we want. We can change the concept of it as well. You can put flowers, you can put turquoise, you can put whatever you want on this piece. If you do understand the concept of it, how to make it, which I will show you in this video. So yeah, I think we have to start this.
And we're starting with the first part of the clasp. For that, we need a circle from 0.5 millimeter thickness of the sheet. After that, we're making 2 rings because 1 ring we will use for the top part of the clasp, a 2nd ring we will use for the 2nd part of the clasp. We're making those jump rings from 1.3 millimeter thickness of the wire and using size 10 on jump ring maker. You can use punches as well, as long as you have 10 millimeter inside diameter. I always make more because usually I use it somewhere. Then we have to close it very well because your soldering will depend on how good your seams are. So we want to touch everything and use as less solder as we can. We always play with the tension when it comes to preparing things for soldering. Tension is the most important part because when you heat your piece, it gets loose. But if you have a good tension going, usually when you're soldering, it even helps to close it better. Now we're cutting a bit of a 3rd part of the clasp just to understand what we're doing. So more details you will get from each, you will understand where you're going because all of the thickness of the metal is very important here. If it's too much, if it's not even, we won't be able to close our clasp. That's why you want to always check and just have few details just to project your clasp, because one thing is to make it blindly and just keep the measurements going, and another thing is to actually understand what's happening. Now we're creating another detail we need on the top part. So this is the part where you can get creative. You can have flowers, you can have actually whatever you want to have. Now you can actually see what we have from details already. And when you have a clear view, you understand where you're going. We're always checking what we have, and more details you will get, you will always collect them and see actually where you're going. Now we're soldering our rings. We have to prepare them, clean all the solder because we will use them for our parts of the clasp. With soldering, it's easy. You always have to understand that you have to prepare things to get soldered. So that means we're always mirroring the pieces that we want to solder. In this case, we're making that ring flat bottom that we could solder it with the flat bottom of the circle.
And I'm happy to announce that this video is sponsored by Rio Grande, which is a big jewelry supply store where I'm buying a lot of my tools from, supplies, all the necessities that I need to create my jewelry. They have categories on the side, so it's quite easy to navigate and choose what you need for your jewelry making. And they're giving you a code with $20 off of your shipping price, so use it until we have it. Thank you, Regrand, for sponsoring this video.
When I'm soldering bigger pieces, I tend to go with bowls out of the solder. You have to heat up the piece to the temperature that your bowl would stick, because your bowl is sticking to the flux, which gets sticky. Here from the sound, you can actually hear that these pliers were just a bit too small for that action. Actually, from the sound, when you're making jewelry, you can tell everything. So again, we're creating the space for that eye design would be soldered. This time we created curved dip that it would be stable. And even for soldering, the more piece will be stable, the easier the soldering itself will be, because nothing is moving. Sometimes when you're working with fire, we have some force pushing our piece, but if you have that space for it to solder, that solder is going into that dip. And then we actually have a very beautiful seams with our soldering as well. Now we're coming back to the third part of the class, and yes, we have to not finish one action and just jump to another, because this is how you make the class to work well. So we need to check everything all the time. Now we're preparing dips for 1mm wire to be soldered with our third part. For me, it was 1.35 centimeter length. For you, maybe it would be a bit different. It really depends how you will make the piece. So some measurements could change for you, so always check what you have. You can be smaller than top part of the class would be, because we have to go inside. And even here we have a tension in our piece. That's why that wire is holding pretty well. If we won't have the tension here, the piece might fall. So you want the tension. Not too much, of course, but the tension has to be there. For second part, we're using sheet which is 0.5mm thick. The length is the same. You need the length would be the same. The height could be more if it's easier for you to solder, because we will sand that off either way. My height for this one was 0.6mm for the reference. In the end, we will want that piece would be the same height as our curved part. You can tell how that detail is holding itself. It has to be that way before soldering, because we want a bit of tension there to have a beautiful, beautiful soldering. And then we're sanding the piece off, as I told you. So always remember, you have to have more that you could sand pieces off. Knowing how much you have to leave will come with the practice. The more practice you will have, the less silver you will have to keep, because you will be more accurate. That's how it works. That's why I always tell you that measurement can be a bit different for you, because it depends on your level in making jewelry. So always check yourself how much you actually need. Now we're coming back to our second ring, which is for the bottom part of our clasp. I call it second part of the clasp because we have top part, we have bottom part, and with the third part, we're actually going into that closure. I hope it's easier to understand this way. You don't want to hammer or put your piece on a mandrel if you have solder touching metal anywhere. So it's very important to clean our piece before hammering. For the reference for this piece, I was hammering it until I reached 0.85mm thickness of that wire. So from the round, we're making it flat. But this way we have more space to solder pieces on. Finally, we reached the hinge part. The length of the hinge you can see in the screen. The main thing about the hinge, you want to separate it in 3 equal parts that our hinge would work well. But keep in mind, when you will be using the saw size will reduce some metal. So you will make some parts smaller. So you have to decide where you are sawing. Either you're sawing in the center of the line, which is the hardest part to keep aligned, I would say. If you do that, then you need equal parts to separate it. But if you will saw that, as I do, on the side of the line, you have where to actually look when you're sawing. So I hope this tip will be useful for you, because it took me so long to actually understand how I have to make my jewelry. But lines should lead you the way, not to be covered by your saw or not to be covered by your file or something. Lines is for you to have where to look at. So when I was dividing that, I was dividing that in two bigger parts, but the middle part was a bit smaller. So when I was using the saw from the outsides of the line, I had the same size of those parts. I hope that makes sense. To make a hinge, we have a few ways how to do it. For me, this one is way easier, where I'm reducing middle part of the hinge, but not fully. That metal will keep your hinges straight, but we will take that out after we soldered. And of course, we're preparing the space for the hinge to be soldered on. You can do preparation part with the file, but the more accurate you will be if you put that in steps. So I'm using my saw to mark. Then I'm coming with the drill to have actual space, because it's easier to control the drill to have straight line if the drill is straight than to actually control the file. We can use a file on top just to even things out. Now we're soldering our hinge. You want that metal part in between would be on top, because we will saw it out later on. It can't touch your piece. That's how much you have to actually reduce the hinge. I have an old video where I'm showing how I'm soldering the hinge, the big one. In that video, I'm soldering a bit differently, so check it out if you haven't seen that one, because we can use a bit of prevention that just in case that solder wouldn't flow into our hinge. So we have ways how to do that. People are using graphite as well. In there, I was using rouge, each to their own. In this one, I'm not using anything. Now we're making just the part where we're opening our clasp. If you want it longer, you can make it longer. If you want it shorter, make it shorter. It's just up to you. I'm just showing you how I'm doing mine. And I think that's enough to open it. I didn't want to make it too big, because sometimes when it's too big, it can, get in a way when you're wearing something, the sweater or something. So all the time, think about practicality when you're doing jewelry piece or design. It's very important. It has to be comfortable, or at least at some level of comfortable. Now we're doing same preparation as always. We have to mirror our shape that we want to solder that piece with or on. And we want perfect connection here, because this is like accurate size. I don't want to go more with the file. If you don't feel comfortable to do it this way, to have correct size, you can always make it a bit bigger on the sides and just sand that off later on. Always pay attention which part of the metal is thicker. In this case, we have a lot of soldering going on already. I didn't want to remelt something too much or move something, because I'm working just with the hard solder. Solder melting temperature everywhere is the same. So you have to be strategical how you are attaching pieces and how you're moving with the flame. I do have a video which I did quite recently about tiny soldering. So I think that's very useful for you to see. Positioning, all of that, it takes some time. Now we're coming back to our second part of the hinge. So it's always like this, spinning around with 3 pieces at once. We're actually reducing the space of the metal that we don't need, and we are re-sawing that. That's why I'm doing a hinge this way, because it's way easier to control the sizing of the details as well. Because for the hinge to work well, we can have a lot of spacing in between our details. So you want to be as close as you can be. Not too tight, but actually better to have it tighter, because we will sand that later on. With sanding, you always reduce some metal. You want to be as tight as you can until you reach the point where you're loosening things up if you need to. Because if you have too perfect fitting, then you will have gapping in the end. While I was explaining you about hinge, we already made a place for our hinge on the top part, and we are bending our top part just to not have it flat. We want to have, quite nice jewelry piece. So when you are bending a bit, not too much, we're creating dimension in our piece. It looks more like a clasp. Now we're soldering the last part of the hinge on our top part of the clasp, which is the end of the soldering for this piece, because the hinge is the last part you want to mess around with, because we don't want to have risk to have that solder in our hinge. When I'm soldering my hinge here, I am placing very small amount of solder, the chip solder, because this hinge is very small. I don't want to move it if I would be placing a solder ball there. So I'm placing the small chip and I'm working my fire into the piece. So I'm beginning from the front part and just moving all that heat to that hinge. And I have to be careful as well, because the front part of our top part of the class is soldered with another detail. So if I'm making that hot too much, it might fall off as well. So I was just like risking there. I'm just looking now, I'm like, I should have put third arm. So I would recommend to hold that part with third hand, at least push it down with third hand just to have a bit of that heat sink. Now we need some details on our bottom part of the hinge, because we want to keep that third part of the clasp inside and secure, not to move everywhere. So this is for the catching. We would have more secure closing, and we would have few options how to close it, because when it's the bracelet, you don't want to be limited. Sometimes those 3 or 5 millimeters could make a big difference how the bracelet is laying. So for the reference, the first detail is 0.5 millimeter thickness, it's 1.6 millimeter height, and the length has to be the diameter of your ring size. And for the bottom part, we had to solder these details after the hinge, because then you see the height that you actually need, because you're closing your clasp with the hinge. That's how you know your correct sizes. Especially for the closure part, it's extremely important where your clasp is actually ending. You have to have all parts collected to see that. That's how you will make it perfect. We're not guessing around anywhere when we're making jewelry, especially when it comes to function. You need this would be perfect. There's no way around. Some things you can adjust. And the second part is 1.2 millimeter thick round wire. And again, we prepared everything for soldering. Our wire is not going anywhere, especially when it's round. If you don't have the placement for the round wire, it will move, it will roll, for sure. Now we're cutting the same 1.2 millimeter wire that it would be touching fully our first round wire we soldered, because these parts will have to go into each other. We're marking everything, we know where to go with the drill, and we don't have any messing around here. Just soldering that part again when we have the dip. When you have full control, you just, do the step, solder, do the step, solder. It will become like a habit for you. Even for this piece, I'm barely using third hand. I think I used it just one time. That shows you that good preparation is a good preparation. Sometimes we need those third hands just to play around with heatsink, but details were pretty close to each other when it comes to thickness of the metal. That's why sometimes you're choosing different way how to solder, but it truly sometimes comes with the mood you're in. Really, because when you look at jewelers when they're working, sometimes it's like, oh, I have to do it this way. Actually, no, maybe the same person could do that in 5 ways. So always choose what is more comfortable for you. It's how it goes with jewelry making. But I'm not saying not to try a different way. That's why I'm here now. That's why I do have 5 ways how to do the same thing. You will be here as well. Practice and different jewelry. Now we're making that closure to be as a closure. We need to drill some parts out of each of the wire that we could get that catching. And that catching will be depending on how you will make that. That's why you have to always check your piece. Drill a bit, try to close it. Drill a bit, try to close it. Just because I wanted to have tight and loosen up a bit, I used 1 millimeter thickness of the wire, but it wasn't a good choice. It was too tight, so Sometimes you do have to experiment. It depends on the tube you're using as well, the inside diameter. So I had to remake that part again, which when you know how to solder, you can fix a lot of stuff. As I always tell you, always fix, because then you can fix your pieces. Especially when you have that complex as this one. Fixing your pieces will get you there. I promise you. And you can close the hinge different ways as well. You can hammer that, you can burnish it, you can solder, you can weld, you can make a bubble when you're soldering. So we have so many options how to finish the hinge. I chose to solder parts. This one is the riskiest of them all. If you don't have a lot of experience with soldering, or if you do and you want to challenge yourself, try to do it this way. And now after all that sanding and tumbling, using compounds as well, be careful when you're sanding your pieces, especially with compounds, harsher ones, because it can loosen your hinge and it can become a bit wobbly and not as controlled and steady as it was before. Actually, bad sanding can ruin everything for you. I do have a video, a long video, talking about the sanding. So many people said it's very useful, so check it out if you haven't seen it. And voila, the hinge is working perfectly. The closure is tight. We love the tight, good closure. This is what we want to see in a good jewelry piece.
Okay, we are done. We created a very beautiful clasp. I hope this video was informative and you could understand the steps way easier. In general, when you're creating jewelry, you want to step up. So hinges and smaller, tiny things to solder is very good thing. Don't be scared of complex jewelry because these pieces teaches you way more than some pieces could. To challenge yourself as a jeweler is very important in your journey because you will feel more confident about creating jewelry in general. You get more designs out of it. You get creative more because your mind understands that we don't have limits. So when you feel that you don't have limits, you can create and expand and have a very beautiful collection of various jewelry pieces that you can make. I do think that we have to try first and then say that it's not for me. I made a lot of jewelry which I was like, okay, I wouldn't want to do that again, right? And I do have some skills now just because I was experimenting, just because I was trying new things. I was trying things that looked hard, but actually when you do something, you're like, oh, I thought it's harder. It's not as hard as it looks like, or opposite. It's so hard. It looked so easy. So I've been there. I'm still getting in there sometimes. And jewelry creation in general is not just about your skills to make jewelry. It's about projecting your jewelry. It's about knowing what step is coming next. All complex pieces has beginning and the end part. And you have to put that in some kind of order, to put it in steps, smaller steps. Then you understand what are you doing and it becomes easier and easier. Trust me, I know that. It looks very hard from the first go, but when you have everything in steps and quite small steps, everything is possible for sure. It's very nice to create function as well because it feels more rewarding. I don't know why that is, but when you accomplish full piece and solder all those tiny details and all of the piece actually starting to make sense, you're like, oh, that's nice. And it keeps you going because with each step, you see that you're coming closer. Ask me questions in the comments because sometimes, you know, when I'm doing voiceovers, I miss some parts, maybe some measurements as well. So feel free to ask me. I will answer for sure. I love our discussions in the comments as well. I love your suggestions all the time because if you have a question, probably some people would want to know that as well. Reading comments, answering, discuss is very good, and give suggestions for this channel as well. I love to read all of that and I love to get knowledge out of you as well, which is very, very useful for me too. So yeah, I hope you liked it and I will see you in my next one.